Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing, Thursday, April 28th, 2022. I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. Can I have a second?
So moved.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So we do have to start off a written decision in the case of Hampton Village LLC, 220 Hampton Road. It's case number 3127. And I will motion to accept the decision as written by counsel. Can I have a second?
So moved.
Second. So then on motion, we'll vote to approve the decision as written in case number 3127, Hampton Village LLC, 220 Hampton Road. Julia, how are you voting?
Aye.
And Luke, how are you voting?
Aye.
And Susan, how are you voting?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that is a unanimous decision approving the decision as written by counsel, denying the special use exception as well as the variances requested. So we can move on to the first pending case, which is 520 Captain's Neck Lane, case number 3135. Kat, is the applicant here?
This is Jolie.
Yes, and Joe.
Oh,
It's
I'm sorry,
Melissa.
Jolie.
Melissa
Thank
Dedovich is
you.
present, so I'll bring her in.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good evening.
How are you, Melissa?
Hi. Could we also let in Ethan Dropkin and Mag Jarrett as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, they are in.
Okay. Good evening, Melissa Dedovich from Peconic Environmental Associates. I'm here on behalf of Paschal LLC. I just want to quickly go over what was discussed at the hearing that was just last week. We were able to luckily turn everything around for the board. As you may recall, there were about 4 items that the board had asked us to look into, or Chick had asked us to look into regarding this project. Just want to remind everybody, we're here voluntarily for a wetlands restoration project. One of the first things was we were talking about the fact that we want this buffer to tie in with the buffer that we've already installed at 500 Captain's Neck Lane. One of the things that Chick had asked, said it would be helpful if we could show a composite map. So here on the screen is a composite map of 500 Captain's Neck Lane, which is a 6.5 acre property, and 520 Captain's Neck Lane, which is located at the bottom, which is a 3 acre property. As you may see, and just to remind the board that the wetland special permit that was obtained for 500 Captain's Neck Lane was also done voluntarily. We did not need any structural relief or anything like that. And again, I have Matt Jarrett from Reese Roberts here, who was vital in as a landscape architect in designing how these two would work together. If you could back this up a little bit, Ethan, so we can see the whole screen. There we go. So actually total, we have about 2 acres of new wetlands buffer where none was previously. The second question we were asked, or second item we were asked to do, is provide a root barrier detail, which is down on the lower left-hand side. If we could blow that up. As you can see that it is going to involve, Chick, a little bit of trenching. The trench will be limited to 12 inches in width. The soil will be removed from the trench, will be stored outside the wetland boundary and backfilled, and the backfill afterwards will be using the excavated material only. The grade will be brought back to existing natural. we have this note on this map, and we also have it shown on our overall planting plan. If we could bring that up. Nope, too far ahead. There we go. Up. Okay. We did add, it's right there, Chick, a notation that that we're gonna have not just about the root barrier right there. You can see it right at the lower right-hand root barrier along the property line. The other item we're asked to add that we were going to do, of course, because it's just common practice, but we add the note, is the installation of silt fencing or echo barrier, which will be placed to prevent any sediment runoff into the wetlands during the installation of the wetlands buffer. The last item I have on my list is we were asked to respond to Chick's. Chick was saying he had a couple questions about the choices in the plants and also about a key map. So the following day, we did get a memo from Chick and from Rusty from his office. And our office, Ethan, I'm going to give this to Ethan, did provide a response as well as a key map. So I'll give it to Ethan now to go over that response. Ethan, are you muted?
Hello?
There you go.
Oh, sorry. You think after this long on Zoom, I'd be all over it, but I feel like that's just the way it is. Yes, so we responded to the memo that we received from Chick. The first point was to include a map that showed the narrative areas that are called out in the site preparation and management plan. And so that map, now we created a new plan that combined the planting plan with the existing conditions plan, which is what those letter codes were referring to. And so this is now referred to in the site preparation plan, and everything should be clear and aligned. As well, in the memo, as to the point that Melissa brought up initially of the site plan of 500 and the site plan of 520, kind of dovetailing nicely and connecting. The whole point is that this feels like one contiguous meadow, even though it's two separate installations. A lot of the notes in the memo referred to changing out or substituting species which already were approved by the ZBA for the 500 planting. And so the concern was that by taking them out of 520, we'll lose the aesthetic connectivity between these two meadows, and they'll look very different from one another as opposed to one contiguous piece. So with that, any additional questions, any additional clarifications that are needed to the memo response or any of the other documentation, I'll open it back up to the board.
Does the board have any questions or comments?
Not
Chick,
for me.
I don't know what
Chick-
Chick has to say.
Chick, you may have questions or comments.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Melissa and Ethan. We did provide the memo, as I said I would at the meeting last week, and Rusty Schmidt on my staff did speak with the landscape architect. I think it was directly with Ethan. So we are okay with the response as recorded in this memo and the changes to the plan. I think Melissa hit all of the items that we had talked about last week. I was checking my notes. I do know that the area designations from the narrative now match the plan. The species are acceptable, the root barrier is good, and the silt control, erosion control is good. My only question at this point is, I see a note on the plan, existing fence to remain. And now that we are doing this buffer, it just seems illogical to leave a fence that would inhibit the migration of wildlife between the wetlands and this nice buffer planting area. So I would just like to see if we can make that a condition or a revision to not have that fence remain.
Hmm. Well, I do know, just to respond to that really quickly, the one reason it is an existing fence, it probably was associated with the swimming pool that had been removed. I personally think I'd like to leave it, and you're gonna laugh why. In my experience, the geese coming up from there tend to trash any kind of plantings you do. I believe we have a similar fence over on 500, and it did help at least for the installation of the plantings. But if you are going to require it as a condition, I think we'd be open to it. That was the only reason we were just going to leave it in there, because it was already existing. Ethan or Matt, if you have any comments about it.
Yeah, I'd just like to second what Melissa had stated. We felt it was good for a couple reasons. Keeping the geese from eating all the young plants and seedlings and everything, which we found was very helpful at 500 for that establishment, which we were actually very surprised by how successfully that established over there. And I think the fence was an important part of it.
I'll just say that, from what I've seen, geese will fly in and they will land on the open areas of the property. And they're probably not going to be migrating between, wetlands areas and the buffer area. They're gonna fly in and occupy that open space. So I think they're gonna be there anyway, and you're probably gonna have control measures to assist with control of the wildfowl. And as I said, I just feel that it kind of defeats a purpose, which is inhibiting wildlife migration, which would be an important factor to consider for the future once the buffer is established and the wetlands are improved.
As you stated right now, I mean, the deer get in wherever the deer want to get in. I was mostly the
They'll go
geese.
right over that.
I mean, the deer are going to go. And I have to say, it hasn't stopped any migration of many animals there. But I did notice, and I know it sounds so odd, but that it did help with the geese, because it's actually when the geese have their babies and the babies can't fly yet, that they waddle up, and I've seen this in many places. That's kind of really why we wanted to keep it, and it worked again at 500. But again, if you're going to condition it, that's fine. I just felt, and it only seems to be that couple months when the geese lay their eggs and have their progeny, and they all come tramping up and just start eating everything. But again, we're open. We just thought, since it's been there for as many years, we would just keep it in there and not have to tear it out. But
And there's a fence currently at 500,
correct.
and that needs to be there because of the pool, or
Yep,
to be somewhere.
correct. And it's a single, and we're not talking about a double fence, or we're not talking about a diamond where a deer can impale itself, right? It's a simple wire fence.
Yeah. How tall is it?
4 feet, I believe.
Well, I don't know how the board feels, but I think the explanation is helpful, and while strictly environmentally, I think it could be better for some types of wildlife. I understand what you're saying about health of the restoration, and that's a primary goal here. So I don't know. I'm on the fence.
I don't even think you could really see it in the pictures. I mean, it's so great. It's really in there. I mean, like, it is wedged in these, and it's really in the areas where we weren't going to be doing much work. I mean, that's why we kind of like wanted to, whatever's successful in that area, that's why we're going to leave the fence. We felt it'd be more disturbance to try to rip it out.
Yeah, that's my concern, is
I
that
was going to
by
mention that as well.
pulling
Yeah.
the fence out, I'm concerned that we'll sort of draw a line down what is either invasive dominated or native dominated, and by pulling it out, we kind of break up that the matrix that's existing and maybe wind up introducing invasives into the native dominated area along that fence line. So that was more my concern, was I didn't want to add additional disturbance.
So I would add like let sleeping dogs lie.
If the board is agreeable, I think it's an adequate explanation on balance. Certainly wildfowl birds are gonna have no problem, deer are gonna have no problem. And it may actually help with some species to keep them out of the more active areas of the yard. So I think the discussion is good, but I'm leaning toward leaving it.
Yeah, Chick, I think we would defer to you. It seemed like a reasonable condition if you thought it was necessary to impose that condition, but if you don't, you'll be writing the the permit.
If I could just mention one more thing, and that this is the only reason I push it. I do feel a little bit strong about it, and the fact that in this case, which is unusual, we're just here voluntarily for a wetlands restoration. And that's, I think, I agree with Ethan. I think we've talked about it on the site. It wasn't mentioned a lot. It really may cause a problem to rip it up with regard to bringing in additional invasives. And that's the only reason I would ask for a little bit of maybe quote unquote leniency, is that this is a really good project. It's very successful at 500 with the same thing, had a fence, left it in, and don't fix it if it's not broke kind of deal. So that's the only reason I would ask if the board would consider that.
Yeah, I think we've had the discussion now and I am okay with it.
Yeah, Chick, I think we're probably ready to motion to close the hearing for all purposes, unless you have any other questions or requests.
As I said, everything that I had asked has been answered and the plans are in shape for permitting if the board so chooses.
And Chairman, I just don't know if there's anybody from the public who wishes to be heard.
Jolie, do you see anybody from the public with their
No,
hand raised?
No,
Okay, so I would motion to close for all purposes, case number 3135, 520 Captain's Neck Lane. Can I have a second?
Are we
Seconded.
closing it for written decision by Chick?
Yes,
Thank you. I'll make that motion.
you just have to second it.
Okay, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. Really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
one moment, I'm gonna bring everyone out.
Chick, regarding the next two cases, 3133 and 3134, 10 Squabble Lane and 12 Squabble Lane, the
Yes,
applicant requests adjournment to May 26th. Do you have some information that would support an adjournment to May 26th? What's going on with the application?
well, we discussed it at the last meeting. I had asked that they add a root barrier on this one. We, to my knowledge, have not gotten a request to reflag the wetland line. You might recall it was two different lines, both of them were old. I had asked them to inventory the existing vegetation and also, in the buffer and in the wetlands, and look to expand the buffer. They had indicated that they were agreeable to that, providing that additional detail and information. They also indicated that their DEC permit was pending. So I think they had quite a bit of work to do, and the meeting was just last week. I have not heard from the applicant, but I can certainly understand the need to adjourn it based on the comments and discussion at the last meeting.
Okay, so I'll motion to accept the applicant's request for adjournment to May 26th, 2022. Can I have a second?
May 26th,
Yes.
second.
And then all in favor of accepting the applicant's request to adjourn both cases 3133 and case 3134, 10 Squabble Lane and 12 Squabble Lane. Can we vote in favor of accepting the adjournment to May 26th?
Aye.
Aye. You're voting nay?
I'm voting nay.
Okay, so we'll go.
I understand, of course, I understand what Chick has said. Okay, I think getting the request for the adjournment that in the afternoon with the amount of time we put in advance is very frustrating.
I have to agree with Julia that it's such a hectic day that it isn't fair really to the board to have all this going on. And I don't know how to stop it, really. I think Julia has an idea, which is no. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I'm concerned that it may be that the applicant in this case is not aware of our procedure, that all adjournments are due the Tuesday before the Thursday public hearing.
Don't they have a consultant who deals with us? I mean, really, at a certain point, there are just too many excuses.
Mhm.
I think Chick's explanation is totally reasonable. But why are we permitting everyone to really make such a hectic? I looked at it too. What is this? I don't know what to tell you to do, but something's got to give, because every time we have a meeting the day of, I think I'm never doing it like this again, because it's absolutely, it's too last minute, and they've been warned 50 times now. It's on the agenda that that's not going to float, and then we allow it. In this case, I think it's reasonable. I don't know if they even thought they were supposed to come back. That's possible, but they do have a consultant who might know. I don't know how to do it, but I think it's abusive in a certain way.
Well, to your point, Susan, they certainly knew that they were not ready for tonight's public hearing. They knew this earlier in the week, but they did opt to wait until today to notify us.
Well, did they or their consultant, this is like, who's in charge? I don't know. Maybe there could be a note to the consultant saying, we had you on the agenda, and at the last minute, please be advised of this is the rule. I don't know why we have to lead them down the garden path to the rule that's written on the agenda, but maybe it would be helpful. I don't know. Part of what Julia is right. Maybe we should just say no. No, sorry.
Jeff, I have not seen the adjournment request. I found out about the adjournment request by looking at this agenda. Jeffrey, who did send in the adjournment request?
It is in Dropbox.
Was it in the Dropbox as of Tuesday?
No, it was in the Dropbox this afternoon, and I actually checked the stamps because I found the volume of change this afternoon was a lot, and I actually went and checked it.
Because Susan, to your point, as we had discussed in the past, we don't consider additional information submitted after Tuesday.
I think it's Julia's point first, mine second, by the way. It's just,
But we've discussed how we don't look at that paperwork. I did not look at this adjournment, so I don't have it. In other words, we've looked at this in the past, and we've translated this into, we simply don't have the request. So we could do whatever we want to do with respect to this application, because the paperwork submitted after Tuesday at noon, as far as our prior discussions are concerned, has not been received by us because our cutoff is that Tuesday.
So practically, we could just
Yes.
say no and they have to do it again. Is that what you want to do?
No, that's why in practical terms, I just think it's bad form right now, and we should, have Jeffrey write a letter and advise the applicant that his any adjournments are required, the Tuesday before the Thursday public hearing and the Thursday before the Tuesday public hearing, if that's how we're proceeding. In this case, let's deal with it informally with the applicant, and I think at some point it will become more clear.
Does the building department that receives this stuff ever say anything like that? They're receiving it, right?
So
We're not.
Chairman, you had asked who said it came from, just says InterScience from James Walker.
Okay, I mean, Chick, you have a good relationship with Jim. Just please let him know that in the future, as far as our procedure goes, we're not going to look at paperwork submitted after, the Tuesday before the Thursday public hearing and the Thursday before any Tuesday public hearings, that we need that much time to look at things. But for this purpose, we'll adjourn to May 26th, and then let's just move on to 2 Meadow Lane, where they also have a request to adjourn to July 12th, and my motion would be not to accept the request to adjourn to July 12th, but instead adjourn case number 3130, 2 Meadow Lane, to the next public hearing. Is that something the other board members would agree to? I'm not sure we should be agreeing to adjournments several months away.
Well, I think we want the applicants to be able to put their best foot forward and to see applications that are sufficient and ready to be discussed and debated. If they're requesting that date down the line, I'm sure a lot of thought went into what the best date would be. Well, I mean, Susan, if we said, no, you have to present next meeting and they don't really have anything to talk about, then that's sort of a waste
I
of our
agree, but
time.
maybe they have to show up and say, we're doing X, Y, and Z. Why
Yeah.
are we bearing the burden of they're running us? I don't actually appreciate that. I
Yeah.
understand that they may have. What did it say, actually? Did it actually explain anything? The letter?
Yeah. Let me go to the letter.
Oh, I saw the letter. Yeah, but it was just a bunch of, I don't know. Can you, when you have a long adjournment like that, here's my objection. In the past, when I was on another board, then like a year later, the board is accused of stalling when we had nothing to do with it. So that is a problem for me. They say, oh, it was the board that did it. We're not doing it. So I don't know how that can be represented, but that is an issue for me.
Well, Luke, in response to your concern, which is, my concern as well, is that you don't want an applicant to appear who's not ready. The alternative for the applicant is to withdraw the application, because what we want here are public hearings that move forward with
Sure.
some expediency,
Mm-hmm.
not just for our board, so that it's considered in a concentrated way, but also for the public.
Right.
If there is a neighbor who's concerned about this, or anybody in the community who's concerned about this, they want to, have their concern, expressed, when it's an active public hearing. When you're adjourning to July 12th, it just doesn't look like an active case anymore. So the applicant, for purposes of discussion here, my view would be the applicant should withdraw and resubmit.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense too. I think that we've sped up our process now by having 2 meetings per month. So the next hearing comes up pretty quickly, and it being on the applicant side of things very often, sometimes that just isn't enough time to get the work done and coordinate all of the consultants that you're relying on. So I would say a adjournment request to skip the next meeting is very reasonable, but these long range adjournments, to your point, should be withdrawals.
Mr. Chairman, I think I recall, and I could be incorrect, I was just looking to see if I had a note of it. I thought that the applicant had indicated on the last date that they might need more time, but that they would ask that the matter be before the board for this meeting. And then they would let the board know. So I'm not disputing all the points being made, but I know that they had mentioned that they thought they might need more time at the last meeting.
Well, let's do this for now. Let me motion to adjourn case number 3130 2 Meadow Lane to the next public hearing, and with that the applicant will appear at the public hearing, knowing that we've adjourned only until the next public hearing, and explain what exactly their process might be, and we can discuss with them whether withdrawal is more appropriate or what exactly is happening. So everybody knows, the board as well as the public, what is happening with this case. Does that?
And Alex,
does that
would
make
you be
sense?
able to communicate that to them?
We can let
Yeah,
them know.
Jeff. Mhm. Okay, so I'll motion to adjourn case number 3130.
Wait.
Sorry.
Before we take that vote, can I just, I'd like to go on the record about this, because Mr. Blinkoff is absolutely correct that the applicant at the last meeting did say they might need as much as a month, that 2 weeks might be tight. But this afternoon is very late to be making that request. I can't believe that it all came together just this afternoon. I think the secondary point, which is the July meeting date, is too far out and is something quite different. But at this level, there's a courtesy that needs to go between all of us to be able to hear this, because we're going to have to recall some of those facts again when they return to us in a month. And I don't want that to be fuzzy for any of us, because we heard a lot of testimony last week about this. And I want us all to have the opportunity for that testimony to be fresh each time we hear it. So let's go ahead with the vote. I just wanted to go on the record and make that statement.
Could I just ask, when this comes in today to the building department, does it go to Jackie Allen or to Alex?
I believe this was sent to Jackie.
Well, then isn't there, I don't know, if you work for a magazine and you sell ads, there's an ad deadline and you say, sorry, it has to be, you missed the deadline. I mean, is there any communication to people that it's beyond the deadline, or are we just sitting here talking to each other about this? That's my concern at this point, because it happens every single time. Something has to give, it has to be improved. And we can't do it. We're not the recipients. If someone asked me, I'd be happy to tell them, sorry, you waited too long. It's written on the agenda, you know that. And there just isn't that happening. So it's all back on us again. So we need a change in some way.
Would you want us to let the applicant know that they have to appear at the next meeting?
No, they can appear or not. We can say they have to, but what you need to tell the applicant is whoever is receiving the request for the adjournment after the deadline is that you're asking for this after the deadline.
Right, and in that case, you would want them to appear for that meeting rather than be adjourned.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Alex, yes,
Pretty
100%. That a request submitted after the Tuesday deadline is not going to be heard. So they should attend the public hearing and discuss why they were unable to submit the adjournment request on time. And then we can kind of have this conversation with the applicant here. But Jeffrey, didn't we write up procedures with respect to adjournment?
We did, Chairman. Am I muted? I'm just looking.
We can hear you.
Okay. We did, but I think that we were planning to revisit them given the change in schedule, because the board.
No, I agree that we're planning to revisit them, but prior to revisiting them, I mean, don't we have written procedures that this board discussed and then put into writing, and was that written document then provided to the building department?
I believe so, Mr. Chairman, but as we're sitting here right now, I would have to go back through.
Okay, well,
I would
let's
have
just, I mean, that's the concern I have, is that if you provided it to the building department and they're not reading and following the current procedure, we might have a communication gap that we need to bridge.
And I'm not even sure it's correct on the agenda. If you look at the last page of the agenda, it just doesn't seem to be consistent with what our understanding was.
We had so many agendas. What does it say? Do you have it? I had trouble finding the most recent one, but I wasn't in the Dropbox. It wasn't in the Dropbox.
It has two columns. One is filed by and the other is the meeting date, but they don't really make a lot of sense to me if those are the cutoff dates for meetings.
Chick, I think that refers to new applications.
So that's not the policy then.
No,
I think we're discussing a different policy.
Jeff, could you state what the policy is, just so we all hear it now and so that the public hears it, and I can also.
I think it's
inform
everything has to be.
InterScience?
My understanding right now is the board wants anything that's going to be submitted for a Thursday meeting no later than before 12 o'clock on the Tuesday preceding.
And for the Tuesday meeting, it's 12 o'clock on the Thursday before.
Right.
Good. I already have my email ready for InterScience, so I'll send that out.
And Jeff, if you could share that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks.
Because yeah, Alex, there were additional protocols, procedures that the board wanted to implement with respect to adjournments, that the first adjournment might be, acceptable as a matter of right, but the second adjournment, would not be, and the applicant might need to appear in person. But we did spend some time trying to suggest ways in which, for everybody's sake, the agenda would proceed more efficiently and expediently for everybody's benefit. The neighborhood and the community could watch an ongoing matter. The board members could keep fresh in their minds, all of the details relevant to an application. And the applicant should know that when they are on the agenda, they need to be ready to focus and keep moving their application forward, or they may have either the meeting closed or provided with the option to withdraw and resubmit when they're ready again. But for the time being, let's look at case number 3130, which is 2 Meadow Lane. I'm sorry, does anybody else have any more comments? So on case number 3130, 2 Meadow Lane, I would motion that we will accept an adjournment to the next public hearing. And Jeffrey, do we have the date of the next public hearing?
I do not. Let me check.
Is it May 10th?
I'm just looking.
I have it as May 10th also, Jolene.
Okay.
I believe it's May 10th.
Okay, so I'll motion to adjourn case number 3130, 2 Meadow Lane, until our next public hearing on May 10th. Can I have a second?
Second that.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I guess we can move on to the next remaining case ready for a public hearing, which is 40 Meadow Lane, case number 3131, Smithtown Partners. Jolie, do you know if the applicant is
Yeah.
here and ready?
Yes.
Thank you.
Michael Semlensky and APD Architects is coming in.
Chairman, will there be any discussion on any other wetlands matters? I'm just looking at the agenda. And everything was
I
properly.
think so, Chick. I think that's it. Did you want to say goodnight?
I think that's a good idea. I always say it's for efficient use of time, so
Well, thank you very much.
thank you. Have a good evening. all.
Have a
Take care.
good
Good
night.
night, Chick.
Good night.
How are you, Michael?
Good evening, members, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm joined by Josh Rosenzweig from Austin Patterson Diston, architect for the project. I would just ask if I can have Josh be able to share his screen.
Of course, Jolie, are you setting that up?
I can't set that up. He has to start sharing his screen.
Okay, so
There he goes. He is able to do so, yes.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for hearing us tonight, and it's nice to see you all.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready? I'm sorry.
yes.
Okay. So the board had asked us for, there were some issues and questions as it related to the renderings that were provided before. So what we wanted to do is provide the board with some some actual photos that then had the proposed additions photoshopped into them. And Josh, can I have you walk everyone through the set of images?
Yes, of course. Hi, everybody. Thank you again. We had a professional photographer meet with us at the site at the exterior conditions. We do provide, I'm going to be showing the board 3 slides this evening as it relates to this. One of the slide will be existing conditions. The other slide will be the existing images of the house with photoshopped renderings, both front elevation and aerial, which I believe was requested. And then we have a drone video to show the board as well, which I can play after the actual slides. I just want to take a quick minute and just make sure that the board knows that we have the proper specifications on all documents as it relates to the location, height, and perspective corrected lens details, as well as the drone specifications that took any shots from the aerial imagery that you will see. It isn't on every PDF, and I just want to make sure everyone knows that we have all those specifications. The first slide is a set of existing conditions just to give the board some perspective, although I know many of the members have seen this house on Meadow Lane and they're well aware of it. But as we were asked to provide some, I will go through each one. Let me just get my mouse in order here. Okay. This first perspective is from the northeast corner of the property across the street. Okay, and of course the camera specifications come into play as well. Just a nice documentation of what you see at the northeast corner of the property. The next shot is a perspective photo from the center line of the property across the street. So you can see that the house is mostly guarded by the evergreen plantings that we have, which is always nice to see. The next shot is a perspective from the northwest corner of the property across the street. So while it's not trying to show anything specific, it's just giving the board an overall contextual image of what you probably already know what the house looks like on Meadow Lane. We then took another perspective shot closer as we start to approach really the part of the house you see, because the rest of it clearly is blanketed by or screened by the front streetscape evergreens. This is a perspective photo of the driveway approach where the road meets the driveway curb cut. And then there is also a shot when you get up the driveway, perspective photo of the lawn approach. So when you finally leave the actual stone driveway and you hit the lawn of the front entry driveway court, this is what you do see. We then took these images that you're seeing here, and we start off with an image of the front elevation similar to what you saw approaching the lawn. And with Photoshop and some good time and patience, we were able to Photoshop the actual dormers that you would see, which is the primary focus of the elevator proposal in the elevation. So if you can see them side by side, I'll give the board a minute to just take a quick look. You can see that the image below is now featuring all the proposed renovations. The image above is an actual shot. I think the board wanted to see this because the renderings, while they are correct in terms of their BIM software, this is a lot more efficient in terms of seeing it in real life. We've even added shadows and also cut in the path that allows you to go around to the elevator in the shrubbery. It wasn't easy, but I think it should be helpful, and I hope it does help the board in looking at this. Before I go to the aerial, does the board have any questions on this particular slide? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you're on mute.
Do any members of the board have any questions or comments at this stage?
No.
Not yet.
Okay.
Go ahead, Josh.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is an aerial. And again, the drone specifications are up on the screen. I think we've captured a very good perspective of the site context here. Oh, I'm sorry, the screen lost there. The top image is the existing condition, and the bottom image is the proposed renovations. You can see that the front facade has gone out towards Meadow Lane by 3 foot 3 3/4. The staircase that gets you up to that area as well has shifted, and the dormers are now present on this photo. These are to scale, and again, the camera specifications are in the top area there. I also have a video. I will play it for the board, and then, of course, if anyone has any questions, I can come back to these stills. Let me just open up the video here, and hopefully the board will be able to see it. Just to describe what it is a street pass at eye level in the center crown of the street. So it's a pretty good visualization if someone were driving east and west down Meadow Lane with, of course, they wouldn't be paying attention to the road, but their head would be turned towards the house. Let me just open this up here. And that was the drone view that I think the board also, I don't know if the board requested it, but we thought it would be very helpful. So that being said, that concludes the photography and the Photoshop renderings. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
I have a comment. The height and mass of the top of the building, I feel has been that you really that what you've shown us is too up close and personal. If you start at Cooper's Beach and start driving toward 40 Meadow Lane, the thing that you see is the giant top of this house, which is higher than any other house, and also east to west or west to east. And you seem to have completely ignored that perspective. Was that, to me, is standing in the right in front of it. It's looming. First of all, no one does stand in front of it, but you can see it from, you know, the stop sign at Gin Lane and First Neck Lane. Those are some of the my concerns. It is out of scale, always was. And now you've added more weight, in a sense, to the top of the building to meet your needs.
The photographs and the perspectives, we tried to just give the board what they had asked us at the last shot. We completely understand this house was taller before the new code was written, which is why we're before the board. And we just hope that the additions we're making which, we have spent a lot of time in coming up with a way to create as little impact as possible. The Architectural Review Board has also looked at those same questions and had found that the house was within the character of the neighborhood. Again, we did enjoy the process with them going through, whether or not the character of the neighborhood would be impacted. Our neighbors did not think so. But I certainly hear your point, and we've done our best to take as many photographs and drone shots in order to give the board what they were looking for at their last request.
And I should point out that the house as it currently exists, although we're in front of this board seeking a height variance, the height variance is to maintain the front gable at its current height. It's just that it's been slid forward that 3 feet in order to accommodate the elevator to run up behind it. In addition, the two gables on either end of the gate, that front end, those two dormers do not reach the full height. They're not higher than the current height. And we've tried to make them blend with the choice of material. And this is the exercise we went through with the Architecture Review Board, with the choice of material to make them blend in with the zinc paneled roof that's behind it, in order to lessen as much as possible the impacts.
Josh, would you mind going back to the overhead shot, please?
Yes.
Can you tell me what in the proposed photo, what's the pitch, the roof pitch on what you are calling the dormers?
The proposed dormers that we've added in the shot, they're essentially, there's only 1 inch of pitch. It's a flat roof dormer, which was actually part of the process with the Architecture Review Board when we wanted to maybe have something a little bit more pitched with more height. They had asked us through a series of hearings in order to minimize the impact and make their mandate, more reasonable in terms of what they're looking for, to lower the height and flatten the roof. So what you're seeing there is the culmination of us trying to appease the Architecture Review Board and the neighborly properties to reduce the height and the visual impact on what you're looking at. So that's where the shape and final pitch comes from, the result of that process.
So they asked you to lower the spring point.
Yes, they did. We actually had it also higher. We have a pretty good established record, as we had spent 6 meetings with them, and I appreciated every meeting because there were a lot of great points. And I think what we have now is actually the culmination of a good process. I enjoyed the process. Originally, it was much higher. Now it's lower, and it causes us a bit of a complicated elevator hoistway, but we did what we had to do. Our elevator cab is a bit short. It's not as tall. I think in the last meeting, I had shown a figure in the elevator shaft on how cavernous it feels. But it was the culmination of that agreement between us, the neighbors, and the community in itself, represented by the Architecture Review Board.
Sure. Well, I have to just reiterate what I said at the last hearing, was that to me, they're not really dormers. They're a new flat roof on the house, even though the spring point is lowered from the main north-south ridge. It just really, and to Susan's point, it makes a too tall house even too taller. Can you go back to the street perspective? I think it's your slide number 1. Okay. So am I correct in reading this, that in the proposed photo, if we look at the gable end, the newly proposed roofs or gables are perpendicular to the ground plane? There's no pitch coming towards us, right? It's a flat base.
You're 100% correct. In fact, the existing fenestration is not being knocked down and rebuilt. It's being relocated. It's the same fenestration.
I'm talking about your proposed dormers, which I guess seem to be rendered in like a zinc.
The proposed dormers are 100% perpendicular to the ground plane.
Yeah. Okay. it's just, you know, to me, it's a lot. And also, it's not, these aren't really the rendering views that I had asked for. I think that if we saw a view up higher and looking axonometrically at the house, it would be very, very clear to everyone that this request is not acceptable.
But it already has been accepted by the Architecture Review Board. It's already been accepted by the Architecture Review Board as being fitting within the character of the neighborhood and fitting within the historic district. I mean, those are the elements. I mean, the elements you know that we're here in front of the board are the basic variance elements as it relates to the 4 points of variance relief that we require, which are the maintaining the height as we have moved the point forward 3 feet, and the 2 sky plane, which are required because of subsequent changes to the zoning code after the premises was built.
So Michael, in so much as it goes along with the 5 points, can you tell me how this the relief sought is not self-created?
The property was bought by someone. They have mobility access issues, and they're requesting an elevator. That's not a self-created hardship by any stretch of the imagination. We're well beyond in this country when we're saying that people with mobility access aren't allowed in certain corners of our village or our town or anything like that. They're allowed to go anywhere they want to, and it's this board's job to provide a reasonable accommodation to those individuals to allow for mobility access. I mean, what we're requesting here is an elevator to achieve reaching all the levels of the thing. So to say it's self-created, it's not. This is something that could happen to each and every one of us if we were to be so stricken as to lose some of our mobility access.
I find that to be kind of far-fetched in terms of.
Yeah, and I definitely don't appreciate you insinuating that we would somehow have problems with disabled people. But
when you're saying that something's self-created because someone chooses a house and needs mobility access to make it more suitable for their needs, that's what you're saying.
Okay, nevertheless,
I'm not implying you have malicious intent, but what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, that is what exactly is being caused.
I don't find your argument to be actually, I resent your argument. How's that? You know, I bought a property and then I had 4 children and I had to move. Same problem. Too much, you know, we couldn't manage. Someone who buys a property, it's theirs. Also, when was it purchased, sir?
It was purchased about a year ago.
Well, okay, and suddenly, really, it's not a hospital, it's a house. People have different needs. And I find that your idea that we're like discriminating against people is really unfair and unnecessary.
Let's just move on to what we need as far as our balancing process, you know, is concerned. The other issue, Michael, that we did have, and we've kind of been receiving information, but incomplete information, and that has to do with the gross floor area. We did receive some gross floor area calculations from the architect. I don't know if it was you, Josh, that provided them.
Yeah, we provided calculations, but we're not asking for gross floor area relief.
No, I know. It's just my question for you, Josh. You know, is really this, and it's the question that a few of my board members have shared with me. When you submitted the certification, you had a qualification that the certification with respect to gross floor area was based upon plans submitted. And I think the board's question to you at the last public hearing was, what is the current gross floor area in the house? And could you certify the current gross floor area in the house.
But,
I guess the
Mr.
question
Chairman,
is, what's the difference? Is there a difference between the existing plans and what's there?
No, I can tell you that we received it when we purchased the property and closed last May. We received an updated certificate of occupancy from the village. We haven't made any structural changes to the interior of the premises since then. We have not applied for a GFA variance. The GFA measurements are not really germane to this application, in that we're not asking for a variance. We're asking for 4 discrete points of variance. Anything that if we need a GFA variance, we'll be right back in front of this board for a GFA variance, but we don't need one. It's not required. And that's, enforcing the GFA levels is something that's the domain of the building inspector. And if the building inspector determines that we need a GFA variance, we will provide that, and we'll deal with that, and we'll be back in front of this board. We don't need a GFA variance, and that's why we've submitted what we have. We haven't gone through the expense of having the architect go back and remeasure that, because we just got an updated CO less than a year ago, and we haven't made.
Michael, nobody's asking you to remeasure anything. If the existing plans are exactly what's there, he wouldn't need to remeasure anything. So I guess
But if you're asking him to recertify, then yes, that's exactly what he would have to do. Yeah.
Yes.
The level of GFA was litigated on this property. And it was determined by the building inspector to be exactly what we presented in the documents that we provided. And but
you're right, Michael. Just to clarify, the board's request was for the architect to recertify the GFA as the house is currently built.
And I would say that's not germane to this application.
Okay.
Could you explain again why you have to come forward 3 feet?
The elevator hoistway, which is quite small for an elevator, it's really standing room only for maybe 1 person or 2, and that was a result of, we started off with a bigger elevator, of course, and wanting to bring out the house a bit more. It represents the 3 foot 3 3/4. The minimal amount that we can get a hoistway on the building so that it can actually egress into the half-story, 2nd floor, 1st floor. So by bringing that brise soleil or that soloist frame forward to the north, that 3 foot 3 3/4, it allows us enough room to get our 5 foot and change hoistway into that space, while keeping within the character of the house. There were many ideas on the table discussed with the Architecture Review Board, and we discussed many different alternatives. This is the culmination of a very vigorous process, but the 3 foot 3 3/4, this much right here actually made a big difference for us to be able to get the hoistway in to egress to 3 stories, or to 2.5 stories rather.
And you are maintaining there is absolutely no way that an elevator could be put inside this building? Yes or no?
I'm not maintaining that at all. We actually have a very established record with the ARB where practicality was discussed in terms of how things can be done feasibility wise. This was the culmination of that. There were many other options discussed. This was the one that worked best for the neighbors, at least the community represented by the Architectural Review Board, not the entire community. And this represented the least impact while working with the existing architecture and trying to create a consistent vocabulary. And 3 foot 3 3/4 still fit within the front yard setback, so it didn't seem that we'd have to go for another variance because we had that space reserved for us, at least for that particular setback.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just to clarify a few points, may I be heard?
Sure, of course.
Sure. So just to review what the board is looking at, because council had made a statement about what the board is permitted to look at, and I think it's important to frame that. ultimately what the board is looking at is whether the benefits sought by the applicant outweighs any detriment to the surrounding community. And the character and the criteria that the board looks at include whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties by the grant of a variance, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance, whether the requested area variance is substantial, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood, and whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration by itself can't preclude the grant of an area variance. And the reason I wanted to review those is this is a separate board from the ARB. The criteria that this board will determine are for this board's determination to make and the board is obligated to look at all of those criteria. So that would include the character of the surrounding neighborhood. And just to clarify, I understood council's statement about the impact of somebody needing a reasonable accommodation, but just to clarify what I believe the board's purpose here is the board is assessing whether or not a goal sought by an applicant could be achieved by a method other than an area variance or actually mitigated. So I don't think the point of the board was to preclude somebody from seeking to reach an established goal, but rather to look at it through the statute that the board is obligated to look at it through. So I would disagree with counsel to the extent that he was saying that if the board does anything contrary to the wishes of the applicant with respect to the proposal, that the board was somehow not permitting the applicant to seek the goal they were seeking. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I did not state that if the board does not do exactly what my client wants, that they're somehow doing that. That's not what I stated.
Well, counsel, if I could, counsel, that my point is that what I had heard counsel to say was that to some extent, if somebody needed an accommodation for a physical issue, and if this board was to decline that this board was somehow acting improperly. And I don't think that was the board's point. I think the board's point was that they were assessing this through the statute that I just set out.
The record is the record. I just want to make it clear that I didn't say that my client can demand anything he wants, which is what counsel just said. But putting that aside, the ARB and the reason why the village has it set up the way it does is because the ARB already made a determination as to how this building and how these proposed changes fit within the historic district and the character of the neighborhood. This board should take notice of that and what that ARB decision, because that is a decision that was made after a six hearing set of discussions. And on top of that, as a result of that hearing and the design that was approved by the Architecture Review Board, these 4 discrete variances were needed, 2 for height and 2 for sky plane, in order to accomplish the design that was approved by the Architecture Review Board.
Well,
I understand that, counsel. I just do want to clarify that the fact that there's been another decision made by a land use board within the village, to the extent your suggestion was that that's then binding upon this board, I did want to clarify that this board has a separate obligation unto itself to look at this under the statute.
And there are times when the zoning board does not go along with the plan of the ARB, and there have to be adjustments made. We are 2 separate boards. We do not take orders from the ARB. We have different interests and duties. Please.
Josh, let's talk about the possibility of an elevator inside the shell of the house. You had mentioned it in the first meeting, but I would just like to touch on it again. A lot of space inside the house is devoted to vertical circulation. And it does seem to me that if the main staircase were made a little bit smaller, you could have room within the existing floor penetrations to put an elevator. And even if you needed to punch through the post-tension concrete, your goal would really be to avoid the tensioning rods and not necessarily the rebar.
Yeah, we did talk about that the last time, and again, I personally recognize that both boards have different mandates, but can look at every project in their own light. I respect that fully. And I don't mean to say that we did bring this up in the ARB to prove any point. I want to bring it up freshly here, but we did bring that up, and it's a good suggestion. We studied it. We looked at what would happen if an elevator did come up within the interior core of what we would call the main west gable facing westerly. And, we did look at what possibly could be the issues. The two main issues that had come about, and again, not issues for any particular member on a board or just our clients, but to some degree, mostly our clients, but understood by the Architecture Review Board, was that the staircase that does provide lots of circulation happens to be in a main living area where there is a lot of circulation. And because of it, it becomes a bit unsightly. This is a smaller of the 2 points, but I'll point this one out first. It becomes a little bit unsightly on how you get a very rigid shaft into the heart of the main circulation of the house, being the annex of living room, dining, sitting, second floor, main hall, and then half-story vestibule to the master wing, and having that become the main object of affection to the experience of the architecture. And that's the smaller of the 2 points. It was found also in that study that if we did accept that and we decided that the aesthetic quality of the circulation visually would be completely obstructed, not just in light, because as you know, the westerly elevation is what's bringing all of that beautiful western light into the house in both the half-story first and second. Let's say that we were able to say, fine, we disregard light and its impacts on the living circulation of a home. We still had also the feasibility of being able to enter the elevator at a half-story level without impacting the side yard property lines and getting into the building. Because again, the client would not prefer to go down into the garage to get to an elevator, but be able to actually egress onto the elevator comfortably from the parking court, where he would be able to get to an elevator as opposed to, going all the way down the west side of the property line. It becomes a lot less pragmatic to do so. I didn't say impossible, less pragmatic. And for me, I'm a little bit, unfortunately, I focus more on that smaller issue when it comes to quality of light and visual impacts of circulation. I know those aren't specifics to being able to do something, but for me, I hold that dear to my heart, and how we design or we modify a design to hurt an experience of architecture in that amount was definitely on the tipping scale for us. But it was certainly looked upon, and exactly in between the stair. It didn't even have to relocate the stair. It could have been just an object in there. But it was explored, and I appreciated the exploration, and I still appreciate looking at alternate means, because in this field, I think we both know there's never one way to solve a problem ever. So that's, I don't know if my explanation is enough, and maybe it's not, but it's just my true subjective opinion.
Well, I mean, I absolutely appreciate your quest for things to be beautiful. You guys are a great architecture firm, obviously, but also what I did hear you just say is that it would have been feasible to put an elevator inside the shell of the house.
I think anything in this world is feasible with enough thought and cost. So there are multiple feasible ways to do anything. And again, not using the ARB to contradict this board, that's not my intent, but we did explore them all. I can explore them further with you as well. I would really caution myself ever to say something is not feasible. Impractical, maybe, yes. Feasible, I've never stopped learning about how to make things feasible.
And I should also note that the placing the elevator where it is, and not along the inside interior western portion, which would require changes to the western face of the building, is what was also in favor, the neighbors to that side were in favor of the plan as is proposed to this board, and its location.
Were they presented the option of seeing no visual change and having the elevator inside?
If we put the elevator inside, there would definitely be some physical changes to the exterior of that.
I don't think so. I mean, were they presented with that option? We have a
We
pretty
just-
tall east-west gable.
We discussed a number of options with them. We spent a significant amount of time with the neighbors at their property, with their view shed from multiple levels of their home, discussing where this elevator would go, and where
one of those was specifically the impact of having the elevator inside the house.
what we talked about inside the house, because what happens when you have it inside the house, you also move that movement up and down through that glass gable from the multiple levels of the house.
Got it.
Jolie, is there anybody in the public that wishes to be heard?
There are no hands up in the attendee poll. Does anyone want to be heard on this application? Please raise your hand. No. There's no one.
Okay, do any other board members have any more questions, or how does the applicant want to leave this at this point?
If the board doesn't have any more questions, I think we could ask that it be closed. The board doesn't need any more information.
Luke, do you have any more information that you would request at this point?
For me, I would close it for a written decision. We did receive a letter today that it was requested if the author of that letter couldn't speak, that it be, I guess, read into the record tonight. Oh, and now he does have his hand up.
Okay. Well, it was the letter from Jeff Broadleib.
That's the one I'm referring to.
Okay.
Would you like me to stop sharing?
Yes, Josh, thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, you're in. You can unmute and start your camera, please.
So if, yes, this is Jack Broadleib. I reside at 166 Halsey Street. And I submitted a letter today speaking to the zoning issues and zoning issues only. I'm happy to review that with the board now, either by sharing my screen. If Luke was going to read it, that's fine. However, the chair wants to proceed. If in fact the decision is to close, I would ask that perhaps it be closed. If you choose to close, there were some things said tonight that I would like to think about it and respond to. So if that means it's closed for public discussion, but not for written input, that's one thing. I don't know how you necessarily conduct your meetings. So again, the first matter is, do you want to share that which I submitted in writing, or if you've all read it, that's your call, Mr. Chair.
Well, we can close and still allow written submissions. We've done that in the past. Or, if you would like, you can read it into the record. Whatever you want, it is okay with us.
My concern was that it was made available to the board members and put in the file so that the applicant would have access to it as well, which is common practice.
And in this case, then the applicant would not have had a chance to respond to what you wrote. So we want to leave it open for all purposes. Otherwise, the only applicant response that would be possible would be a written response.
And we're fine with just a written response, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so Jeffrey, it seems like we could close it. I mean, you have the floor, so you can say whatever you wish to say to us at this public hearing, or we can, as an alternate, close, subject to accepting written submissions over the next 2 weeks.
Well, if each of the board members has read the letter, which again speaks only to the matters of zoning issues and the factors by which the ZBA is empowered to make a determination, then I'm satisfied with everybody's ability to read, and I don't want to necessarily take any more time this evening. But again, it's your call. I mean, if Julia, Susan, Luke, and you, Mark, have read which I submitted, then I'm fine.
But I think as a public hearing, that it should be, you should have.
Okay. Well, that's, Julia, you make a good point as well. So if you allow me to share my screen, I will. So, okay, so now let me find, okay, I think that's it. Okay, sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, can you see my screen? Okay, so for all those on here, I submitted the following, which again speaks to the zoning issue. So, under 11627C, granting of variances, the principles that apply are fivefold. One, strict application of the chapter would cause practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships. And the legal and practical use of this building as a single family residence is not compromised whether or not there's an elevator. It is still usable as a single family residence. The request to install an elevator is a personal convenience, as was stated here in many ways. The applicant knowingly bought this property while it's public knowledge that they had been looking at other properties on the East End, and as was quoted in the Post, New York Post, they looked at multiple
there's a reliable
houses.
source.
And this, Michael, when you were on the floor, I did not interrupt you, so I don't expect to be interrupted either. Is that agreed? Is that agreed?
I believe Mr. Michael
With the exception of the
should
dog.
not be on here.
Yeah, actually, Michael, if you don't mind, usually as a matter of our procedure, when
Okay.
the
All
public
right.
or anybody else
Let's
is speaking,
move
we usually
on.
do remove the applicant. So if you don't mind, we're going to have you, exit.
let's move
and then
on.
you
All
can
right,
always come back.
as long as I have time at the end to rebut, that'll be fine.
100%. You will.
Okay,
Yeah, you
that's fine.
just reappear.
Of course. Of course. Let me proceed, Michael, and then the chair has given you the opportunity to rebut. And so if there is any claim, sorry for that interruption, if there is any claim of hardship, it's self-created. Such variance, another criteria, such variance is the minimum variance that will relieve such practical difficulties. Well, the structure was originally built as non-conforming. Recent codes, as was alluded to, have made it even more non-conforming, and a granting of yet a subsequent variance on top of that would make it, if that's even conceivable, even more non-conforming. So it's an absurdity to say that this is the minimum variance that would alleviate the problem. Then there's the spirit and general purposes of the intent of this chapter 116-1, which is to guide and regulate orderly growth and to be consistent with the municipality's master plan, and B, to promote established character and social economic value for both private and public property, and L, to eliminate non-conforming uses gradually. Well, adding a personal amenity that increases the scale of nonconformity can hardly be considered beneficial to the interests of the people, meaning the village in total. And adding to nonconformity is a direct or is contrary to the provision 116-1L, which is intent on eliminating non-conforming uses as opposed to adding to them. Such variance is so designated as to provide reasonable consideration, among other things, to character of the neighborhood, which, as Attorney Blinkoff said, is in fact part of this board's purview, separate from whatever the Architectural Review Board had considered. And that it is again consistent with the master plan. Well, the master plan in 2000 was particularly concerned with the increasing number of large-scale structures and recommended and subsequently implemented pyramid laws. And even since then, they were tightened yet again. And as Member Stevenson said, driving down South Neck, this property is head and shoulders above all the others. And east to west, it imposes itself on the street. And again, within the context of what you were talking about, is it a plus or a negative to the neighborhood and the historic district? That's a judgment that is left to you as board members, separate from whatever any other board may have done. And finally, such variance does not involve substantial detriment to the public welfare nor impair the intent or purpose of the zone plan and of this chapter. A variance request, this particular one, is counter to the intent of the zone plan and the recently enacted changes, which were intended to further restrict the size and scale of what could be constructed on this lot and this type of lot. So again, my comments are related strictly to zoning and how it impacts this particular property in relation to the other properties and on the zoning laws themselves. So thank you for the time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Would you like me to bring back in the council?
If he would like to be brought back.
Okay, hold on.
You have to take Jeff out.
I am.
Thank you, Jeff.
There's a little bit of a delay. Mr. Sindlisky, you're in. If you could unmute and turn on your camera, please.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, great, thank you. Ms. Sharon, if we can, I would just like for the record to be clear that the last speaker is not just a resident, he also is the chairman of the Architecture Review Board for the village and participated in the previous decision that this board, he was in the minority, and that board did not agree with him in relation to this application. But I just wanted in the record that he's not just a resident of the town. He actually participated in a decision relating to this.
I think it was a 3-2 vote. Is that right?
Yes, it was correct. And that decision, I believe, was submitted to in the record for this board.
Could you just a second? Every one of us on this board is a resident of the village and has rights as residents. So just because he's given his time to the ARB does not mean that he can't, as a resident, have objections to any application.
I'm not
at a public meeting.
I know. I'm just clarifying I'm making a record, which is my client's right to as well. My client's entitled to make the record in front of this board, and that's what we're doing. Ms. Chairman, if we may, I would like to respond in writing to the submission that was made by Mr. Broadleaf, the previous speaker. So if the board doesn't have any further questions, if we could close it subject to 2 weeks to submit written comments.
Yeah, we may do that. are you done with your presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so why don't we, Jolie, if you could exit Michael, and then I do have some questions for the board.
Okay.
We can close this for all purposes, subject to receiving written comments over the next 2 weeks. One concern I have, and I thought it had been a concern of several board members at the last public hearing, and that had to do with the current gross floor area. Is anybody else still concerned about that?
I don't know what the issue, I don't know. So the gross floor area of this building is bigger than it should be?
Well, there's two possibilities. I usually don't have an issue with an applicant providing a certification with respect to existing gross floor area. So that we're kind of receiving, so much pushback, I guess makes me wonder what is going on and how does that impact our decision. One possibility, again, just conjecture, is that what they are doing here further increases GFA. I don't know if that question has been asked and answered by the building department. And what impact does this application have on gross floor area? It's always a case, it's always an issue for any application. Where are we on gross floor area? I don't know what this house has. So I'm asking the board members, is anybody else concerned that perhaps we're over GFA, or should we kind of accept the applicant's, frankly, refusal to recertify the GFA?
Does Alex know anything about any of this? Yeah, you.
If you like, I just wanted to offer that the applicant did share a gross floor area calculation showing the addition. So they are showing with the addition, their gross floor area is still under what's permitted. And that was based on.
When I looked at that, Luke, Alex, and the question I had was, it said based upon plans submitted.
Correct.
Should we be concerned about what is actually in that house? In other words, perhaps the construction was not completed according to the plans submitted.
Right, and a new certificate of occupancy does not mean that the house was re-inspected or toured by the building inspector. But Mark, I agree with you that likely they are over GFA, but in light of the 5 points, whether they're over or under, I don't think they have come close to satisfying the 5 points to receive the area variance.
Mr. Chairman, I do just want to clarify, you mentioned that their submission said it was based on submitted plans. I think what it actually said is based on existing permit records.
Okay.
Do we have those?
Yes, and I believe they were placed in the Dropbox.
So maybe my point is not important. Is that where you, Susan and Julia, are coming out as far as your balancing, or do you want to discuss this some more? Otherwise, I mean, perhaps what the point I'm raising is not critical because you're basing your decision on other factors.
I'd have to say I thought I'm in Luke's tent, that there's so many other things. This was such a peculiar, when the house was built, it's like 7-foot setbacks on the side. The whole thing has been, and then the change in the zoning with the sky plane it is enormously tall because of the zoning at the time with the FEMA hysteria. And it is unfortunate, but from my perspective, it's more unfortunate if we allow them to add those. The additions are quite visible. And as far as I'm concerned, unnecessary, I guess is what I think. There is a way. I also feel, it's something that was bought a year ago. I mean, what are we doing here? It just seems to me to be, and to be accused of like not being ADA compliant. That's not, this is a house. This is somebody's house. He didn't build it. He bought it. He saw it. And I feel like that's what he got. And if he doesn't like it, that's unfortunate too, or it doesn't meet his needs, but it wouldn't be the first time that anyone had this kind of a situation. So I'm not sure that the GFA has a lot to do with my decision making.
Julia, do you want to offer your views?
Muted, Julia.
Thank you. My thoughts in terms of the GFA are that it isn't at the top of the balancing that I'm thinking about at this point. I do feel as though I need some time to process this evening's testimony in order to be clear about what my opinion is. I definitely have an impression based on the 2 meetings that we've heard, the comments and questions that have been raised, but I haven't fully formulated my opinion at this point.
Are you okay with closing the public hearing, but accepting written submissions over the next 14 days?
Yes, I am.
Chair,
Sorry.
Mr. Senleski has his hand up again. Would you like me to bring him back in?
Well, if we're going to close the hearing, certainly.
There is,
I don't want to.
before that happens, Julie, there is one aspect of the GFA that I don't know, which is what percentage of the GFA is this request? Where does it fit?
Doesn't.
Who said that? Jeff?
They're not asking for a variance with respect to GFA at this point. Their argument is that if at some point the building department determines that they're non-compliant with GFA, they would need to return to the board. The denial that they received went to the other variances they're seeking, which involve the height and the sky plane or the pyramid law.
But why would, if they, don't you think it should be vetted? Why would we be going back again? Why are we working on something that I don't know? But if the GFA is not acceptable to the building department, shouldn't that be all part of the same application? This kind of, it's called bootstrapping, where now we have agreed to something and then it turns out, whoops, that the GFA is not, it's over the GFA. I really wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. This seems to be, I'd like to actually do it in a way that all necessary variances are requested at the same time. Not that we give permission, let's say, to something, and then it turns out it needs another variance. That's not really how it should work. So I don't know what that determination is. Alex or Jeff, can you straighten us out on that?
I mean, fundamentally, I'm surprised that this didn't come to us first and then the ARB. I don't recall what the process.
It's the historic district of the historic beach district.
Well, I mean, it does sound like the GFA is not a critical part of the board members balancing. So I think I can table any concerns I might have about GFA in this particular case, since it doesn't seem critical in this particular case, and just see going forward, working with Alex on, some better process, so we actually know what a house that we're considering, it looks like, floor plans, et cetera. So maybe floor plans are necessary. with respect to all future applications, but I'm not sure this is the case where we have to explore that. Do you know what I mean, Alex? Maybe that's just part of an application that, we have existing floor plans.
Sure, and I think on this case, there are existing floor plans if the board would like to review them. I know the building inspector did look at GFA as part of that application when we signed off on the denial. And there was that subsequent certification from the architect that I did discuss with him, and I can ask him to take a closer look if the board has questions. But as council said, it's currently not part of their application.
Alex, I think, where Mark and I were on this was that it is, in my experience, unusual to see spaces listed as mechanical spaces, behind the headboard of the primary bedroom. That would be poor planning by a mechanical engineer. And there's substantial space on the ground level that could be ripe for post C of O development. And if there was no development post C of O, then I think the architecture firm would have no problem certifying that the plans submitted are still accurate to this day. But to hedge and say that we are just reminding you of the gross floor area that was permitted some years ago does raise a red flag to me. And the addition of the 3 feet forward towards the street, if I remember correctly, does push the house very, very close to its allowable GFA. And so that was sort of where we were coming from on that. I do think that the building department should probably pay a visit to the house if they can, to certify it themselves if the architect won't. But the way in which the architect responded to the request does definitely raise a red flag to me. Having said that, Chairman, there's other things on the balance that are,
No, I get it. No, you were very clear on that. That's not the most critical factor in this particular case. So, Jolie, if Michael wants to return, he's certainly welcome to return, and then we can close the hearing for further deliberations, among board members.
Okay, let me bring him in. Okay, Mr. Sandleski, you're in.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In light of the board's comments, I think that if I may, can I request an adjournment for all purposes? So I have time to speak to my client and discuss the board's comments.
Is that okay with board members?
Well, for all purposes, what's that?
No, we would just be leaving it open for all purposes. We wouldn't be closing the hearing at this point.
I don't find it necessary.
I actually don't either, but that's what I'm not against it, but I just think it's, I don't know.
Julia, do you have any problem with keeping it open for all purposes? Julia?
Muted.
I'm thinking. I need a second to think. I think this is a public hearing. If Mr. Sandleski wants the opportunity to speak with his client, I think he should have that opportunity to do so.
Okay, so let's motion now to leave the public hearing open for all purposes in case number 3131 40 Meadow Lane, Smithtown Partners. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor? Are you in favor, Susan?
No. Since it's 2-2, I will be in favor because it's not really fair otherwise, I think. Okay, I'm in favor.
And Luke, how's your vote?
I'm not in favor.
Okay, so the vote is that we can leave it open for all purposes in case number 3131 40 Meadow Lane. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
I think that's the end of our agenda.
And if we could just know, Mr. Chairman, that the other items as mentioned in the agenda were adjourned. And I believe the board had received prior notice. So is the board confirming that those matters will be passed in accord with the agenda?
Which
Just the other ones that were mentioned on the agenda.
Pond Lane, Great Plains Road, Von Brunt, are all, those are the ones that we did not discuss because we've had notice about them prior to today.
and I didn't mention them because I thought at the last public hearing we had accepted their adjournment. Would we need to do it again?
I was just noting as a matter of record, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think that's our record, that with respect to the other adjournments, case number 3125, 41 Van Brunt, with the case of 3104, 51 Pond Lane, and with respect to those two cases, we had approved their adjournments at the prior public hearing.
That the board had either approved or determined to adjourn, yes.
How about Captain's Neck Lane? What happened with that? Was that today?
That was today. That was 520, 500.
We talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry.
There was also an adjournment with respect to 270 Great Plains that we accepted their adjournment.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll motion to close the public hearing for April 28th. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.